Thing number three, moving on, we're talking about the dollar. Even without a functional BRICS option, Gary, you call out the dollar is still losing share as a reserve currency. Thing number three, the dollar is still the world's reserve currency and is still losing share. Gary, tell us more.
So, Rob, this is something that we've been talking about at Deep Knowledge Investing since 2022, 3 years ago. Um, First of all, let's talk about what it means to be the global reserve currency, because that is the dollar right now. And the reserve currency tends to trade hands every 100 or 150 years. And being the world's reserve currency means that your currency is typically the one most held and most in demand by foreign central banks. It's the one that they hold in order to preserve value and settle balance of payments. And so, as a great example, a lot of people talk about the petrodollar, and we actually helped distribute Alex Macreese's book Running on Empty, where he talked about the creation of the petrodollar and the coming destruction of it. But for many, many years, all oil was priced in dollars. So even if you had two countries that weren't dollar-based countries, if they were trading oil, they were trading either in dollars or based on dollars. Oil was priced in dollars, and world energy is a big deal. So all of that gives the United States both a huge advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is, people call it the exorbitant privilege. And what that means is that we have, as the United States, have been able to print trillions of dollars of assets out of thin air, send them around the world, and receive goods and services. So literally, we have people here in the US, in the Treasury Department, in the Federal Reserve, they push a button, they create dollars, we send those dollars overseas, and other countries send us their goods. And that's pretty great, right? Well, the problem with it is we end up with inflation and a hollowing out of our manufacturing sector. So, for instance, if where I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and back in the 80s, when we saw the auto industry switching to the Rust Belt, we saw tons of manufacturing jobs in places like Michigan and Ohio moving overseas, and that our steel mills do not produce like they used to. So these are the kinds of problems that we have now. The dollar is still the dominant global reserve currency. The dollar is still the most attractive currency in the world. However, the big problem is we are losing share, and we're losing share fast. Credit to new DKI intern Josh Reeves. He put up a chart showing that if we go back just to 2016, Rob, the dollar as a share of central bank reserves was almost 66%. It has fallen down to 57%. That is a 9% decrease in under a decade. This is a huge problem. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One is Washington has used the dollar as a hammer. We've used it to try to force countries to bend to our will, to accept our foreign policy prescriptions. And, that's fine. We like what we like, and we want to exercise control and influence all over the world. Well, other countries may not be so happy about that. Also, because we've printed so many dollars, we've had inflation. And so lots of other countries are switching to different reserve currencies. They're switching to gold. There's a lot of talk. A lot of countries are looking at using Bitcoin as reserves. And by the way, countries like China and India have been buying huge amounts of gold. They're not doing that because they have faith in the dollar.
Yeah, Gary, you mentioned the BRICS commodity-backed currency about a year ago. Obviously, that talks about, big piece of the population. Why would they want less exposure to the dollar, Gary? Give us more insight into that.
So BRICS is a growing financial coalition. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia. Now, if you take a look, right, India and China, the two most populous countries in the world. Saudi Arabia, boy, are they influential in the energy market. Same with Russia. Brazil, they are an economic powerhouse. Maybe not the United States, but that country has grown a lot. And that BRICS coalition has now grown to several dozen countries, making up more than half of the people on the planet. Now, I started talking about this about a year ago, and I said, hey, this is potentially a problem. And a lot of people said to me, no, it's not. There will never be a BRICS currency. How would they organize it? How would they trust each other? These are countries without common interests. Okay, these are all fair points. And in fairness, a year later, we still don't have a BRICS currency. But the point that I made at the time was not so much that I thought we'd have a commodity backed BRICS currency by a certain date. The point that I made is that more than half the world wants less exposure to the dollar. They don't like the fact that Washington abuses the dollar. Again, it's not called the exorbitant privilege because people like it. Places like Russia and China are nervous holding dollars because they're worried the US government will freeze their assets. They view us, whether you think it's right or wrong, they view us and they view the dollar as untrustworthy. And so, anytime more than half the world is saying, we want less exposure to your currency, we end up with a situation where, again, in under a decade, we've had a 9% loss of share. That is a gigantic loss as other countries are looking for an exit to the dollar. And the reason that's such a huge problem here is, Rob, want to take a guess what the number one export of the United States is?
I feel like I should know this.
It's
Go.
it's not a trick question. It is dollars. We export
I
more.
actually was going to say dollars, but that seemed like a trick question that you were leading me into. And it's too late at night here, Gary, for those questions.
Don't worry, Rob. We're gonna get you a free subscription to Deep Knowledge Investing, and you're gonna be fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
based on the question or the topic and the thing, I was going to go dollars, but then I was like, I'm gonna let Gary answer this. Make sure I don't put my foot. I don't want to become a
Yeah.
meme, or maybe I do, right? Because I am the marketing guy, so that'd be great.
There you go. No, it really is dollars. And so,
Yeah.
this kind of dollar avoidance by other countries, that can change our trade policy, our foreign policy. Our ability to use the dollar, right now, Washington is using the dollar as a weapon. Um, and that's not a great way to use it. It would be better if we were to use the dollar for influence. And somebody might say, hey, you're sort of playing around with it. And yeah, there's a little bit of language artfulness in that. But I don't think it's the same. Rob, there's a huge difference between me saying, hey, Rob, I really love working with Flying V. If you could help me with this, I'd really appreciate it, and I could do this for you, and let's collaborate, right? That's one thing. To say, Rob, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to use my assets to hurt you and freeze your dollar assets. That's a very different thing. And so, the more share the dollar loses, the more influence we lose in the world. And right now we're running a pretty expansive, aggressive foreign policy. So something's going to have to change along the way.
We'll keep you in touch and in tune with or when or what changes here on the Five Things.